Hello, welcome to the 2021 Guide to Small Business Recovery. I know it's still 2020, but this year, as well, everybody can attest, has been one of the worst years of business. The pandemic has hit everybody. So on today's show, we're going to actually, we've got a leading small business expert. He comes from the big end of town, but now he helps small businesses with their strategies. And so on today's show, my guest, Jim Scott, who is a former vice president at global level for Sage, a major international accounting software company, who now works as a small business consultant. He strategizes with business. So on today's show, he has kindly offered his time to walk through with us some very simple steps that you can implement right now at the end of 2020. And that's why we're titling the show, The 2021 Guide to Small Business Recovery. And Jim Scott joins us on the line. Hello, Jim. How are you?
Hi, Ken. I'm very good. Thank you.
Now, as it says here, your company is wearebright.net. You're a former Sage global vice president. How did you first start your career?
I actually started my career a long time back in sales, and I joined Sage as a sales agent, working with small businesses, looking at accounting and software solutions for small businesses, and the career went on from there really. But that's where I started.
Yes, it's interesting. I first heard about you late last week. If you go to my channel, there is an interview where I interview Paul Lancaster, who runs Newcastle Startup Week, who's an expert in helping small businesses start up businesses. And in preparing this interview, you have an incredibly impressive CV. And I'm thinking, how do I summarize this in a couple of words? And so I think the best person to summarize it is the actual gentleman who introduced us.
I know you've got loads of amazing experience, because we'll talk about that now. So we know each other because we both used to work for Sage, but
long time ago.
Yeah, but I mean, you were there close to 20 years, weren't you?
Yes.
Did you start off in telesales, but you've worked all the way up? You were managing director for the UK and Ireland for 6 months, like interim, and then you ended up as the global vice president of the partner program. So you've had an amazing career in FTSE 100 software company. I would say probably the UK's biggest and best company that you work for. So you've all that experience you've got, which you're now bringing to your clients through Bright. So what would you say? We were talking before about the difference between small business and corporate enterprise level. Is smaller ones are often very good at innovation and developing new products and services, but not so good at execution. But the larger ones are really good at execution. They've hit on a formula of success, and they're very good at rinse and repeat, just doing it again and again, and like they've got that process locked down.
And that's why I've called upon you, because in these times where people are struggling, I mean, I know myself when the global we're already done the global financial crisis. Seemed like a global financial crisis right at the moment, the last 6 months. But when COVID first hit, I mean, I remember the first Sunday night, that particular week, I was preparing to do a $20,000 sales training workshop, which is a lot of money. And I got a phone call, 11:30 Sunday night, Ken, we may even need to shut our business. We're going to have to put everything on hold. So there's never been a better time to start developing the strategy, because we've got to make up for the past 6 months. And that's why I've invited Jim on the program, because Jim, you have an incredible track record of working at a high level. I mean, let's look at and I've just mocked up a business card here, but as it says, Sage, Jim Scott, Global Vice President at the Sage Group, only technology company in the FTSE 100. And it's amazing how that you have transitioned all of that in-depth experience. I mean, the type of experience that Jim has had in the past you would have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, the type of experience most small business people never get to. So who better than to talk about a great strategy for 2021 than you? Okay, well, the purpose of my show, which is called the Sales and Marketing Show, is to give people practical examples. And why, when Paul mentioned to me, Paul Lancaster last week, he said, look, Jim has got extensive experience. He's taken all of his knowledge from the big end of the town and he's applying it to the small end of town. So in this program, I'm hoping to give some people some tips, some strategies that big businesses use. Give us an example of a business that, wants to begin the process of organising themselves for growth, but is not quite clear where to go. Give us an example of how you've helped somebody like that and what that taught you and the people watching this program could apply in 2021.
Okay, so one specific example is a company that I engaged with probably around about 3 years ago now. And at the time, that company was somewhat successful. They were performing reasonably well and they were growing. The two owners of the company at the time, very humble guys, very ambitious, very entrepreneurial, but they didn't have the experience to be able to put a framework down on the business to enable it to grow in a way that would allow it to be structured, that would encourage potential suitors or acquirers in the future to be able to have a structured view of the business and look for synergies and things that would easily transfer into their business, which makes the asset much more attractive. So we embarked on a what ended up being a 3-year journey where we sat down initially and we began to evaluate specifically what it was that the owners wanted to achieve over the 3-year period. And they were very clear. They wanted an exit. They wanted to be able to get the business to a point where it was successful for a bunch of different reasons, but it would be attractive enough to be able to bring in maybe a kind of trade buyer who would be interested in purchasing the business. So we took them through a series of workshops, understanding where the gaps were in the business, what specifically the strategy was for growing that business. And we actually got it to a point where there was probably 3 key things that we focused on. The first was getting the service levels for the client, or for the end customer, up to a regulatory type standard, because there was an assumption in that business at that time that there would be regulation coming in from central government at a point over the next 3 years. So we wanted to be ahead of that and have regulatory level service in place for clients before any regulation was ever put in, or at least have the infrastructure in place to be able to adopt it when it did. The second was the sales model. So we looked very carefully at what was happening around the industry, and it was a real boom industry at the time. It was actually energy, gas and electric type energy for businesses. So we looked very carefully at the sales model, what the competitors were doing, and we made we took a balanced risk to flip the model for sales on its head. So at the time, a lot of the competitors they had a telesales operation where telesales would call out hundreds of people a day. They'd get interest from 1 or 2, 3, 4 people per 100, and then they would send a rep out to visit the business, to sit down with the owner and to agree a way forward. We actually turned that on its head, where we had the reps visiting the end user and then closing out through telesales. So it was completely different. And as it transpired, that was one of the main things that attracted the eventual acquirer to the business, because the model was so unique and so effective. And then the final piece to that, sorry Ken, the third piece to that was the automation within the business, the systemization of the business. So we spent a lot of time being very clear on what processes drove the business and drove the results, and we systemized those so that they could be, kind of cookie cutter. You could take them and then you could apply them to another business very easily, where they kind of pick up and transfer. So it made it very, very easy for an acquirer to come in, see the value in the service levels to the end customer, understand they had a unique sales model, and pick up their systems and just transfer them into their business. So it made it very easy for them. So they're the sorts of things that we did with that client.
So if you were to sit down today and we had a small business person, what would you suggest? What's some things, some simple things that they could do right now between now and Christmas? For example, give the type of thing I'm talking about. I'm looking in February at launching a membership site to coach small business people. Now, I'm using this channel to grow an audience and grow connection. Obviously, I have my own business connections and I know how to get on the phone and sell. If you were advising me, what was some suggestions you would make for me between now and December to prepare myself for the coming January?
Okay, that's a good question. So I think there's probably a couple of things that I would advise you to do. I think the first things first, wherever possible, recurring revenues or subscription revenues are preferable right now. So if you can get somebody to commit to ongoing payments of 6 or 12 months for a service or a product, that really is the best way to go for now. So if somebody makes a decision to purchase, what I would advise people to consider is a modest upfront fee and a subscription fee over time. So that way you're kind of locking in your future revenues to a degree, and there's always going to be drop off, there's always going to be churn in that revenue, but in the main you have a revenue stream that's going to be protected over time. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, which you're already doing, is I would advise strongly to begin to build up a community that understands the offering that you're putting forward, that engages, more importantly, that engages with the offering, and you create chatter in that community, and you kind of stack the deck in your favor a little bit to be able to launch a product. If a community already exists, that's already engaged, that's already talking about what it is that you do, when you put an offering down and you give them something specific, they're much more likely to want to at least inquire and engage and give you the opportunity to sell that to them. So just off the top of my head, there are a couple of things that I think small businesses could quite easily do over the next couple of months to prepare for 2021.
Now, your background is software. I have a friend who owns an orthotics company based here in Australia, started manufacturing in China, and then is distributing now in the UK and Europe. And I remember when he started that business, there was no such thing as the internet. I mean, you couldn't do anything. Like, here I am in Australia and I'm interviewing you in England. I mean, when he started, you'd be lucky if you could send a fax, you know what I mean? Like, that was about as exciting as it was. And it was a challenging time. Can you give us an example? Because one of the things I've found is, and that, I mean, exactly right, I'm following your advice. I mean, this interview came about because I interviewed Paul Lancaster saw an interview with me, Justin Brown. I interviewed Justin Brown, a leading YouTube expert, on how to make YouTube videos. That spoke directly to where Paul was coming from. He reached out to me, I reached out to him, he's interviewed me, and now we've introduced. What do they say? The old thing, we're only seven people away from connecting with everybody, but you've got to be proactive. Now, in your business, I understand that you had a client who was a software company and they were looking for partners to expand. How did you help them expand their market at the same time save them money?
Yes, I've done this with a couple of different clients now, or a few different clients. I think the one that you and I discussed was, they had a very specific challenge. So their challenge was that their product was actually very good. Their direct sales channel was strong and was performing very well, but it was kind of topping out. They were at a point where they had decent coverage from a direct perspective, and they needed to reach a slightly different type of client, a different type of customer. And these customers were almost secured or locked into channel partners, to VARs or value-added resellers of competitors and different solutions. So when we sat down, we talked about an opportunity which would be to kind of dress the product up a little bit differently, allow the partners to add their own value to it, and create a partner program which they could then take out to prospective partners and talk to them about. So what they ended up with is if you can imagine a kind of central hub, their product was a kind of central hub, and we created APIs in the product which allow partners to begin to attach their own service offerings and their own product offerings into the core product. We then created a partner program which allowed them to receive monetary reward, so they got a commission on reselling product on an ongoing basis. But as importantly, there was aspects of assistance with branding, with marketing, with doing the deal with the end user. So we made it as simple as possible for partners to be able to take the core product, to add value to it by attaching their own products and services, and then take it out to the prospective clients, or take it out to their existing clients. And it was so attractive that actually that particular company, the volume of partner applications they got tripled, and their channel revenues doubled over a period of about 14 months. So they went from being modestly successful to having a strong and growing channel of reliable partners who were not just delivering revenue, but they were assisting with the exposure of their brand and adding value to their product and bringing new customers in to them. So channel, I think, you asked, the last question you asked about how can small businesses think about 2021. I think partnerships is going to be a critical consideration in 2021, because not only are you challenged by the market, but everybody else is as well. So where there is opportunities to collaborate and work together for the greater good, I think that is something that will be that will be something that will be very prevalent in 2021.
Now, one of the things that we're all suffering from, I mean, we're very lucky in this country. Australia has JobKeeper, so we're being provided financing by the government through to March. But cash flow has become a big issue. In Australia, the government has actually allowed us to go in super. Are there measures going on in the UK at the moment to help you with cash flow?
There are some measures. I don't think it's as generous in the UK. So, for example, our assistance is based on rateable value, which is a little bit outdated. The way they assess rateable value of businesses is a little bit outdated today. So you could be a business turning over, a couple of £100,000, and still in the lowest rateable value. And you could have a payroll to pay, you could have a relatively high rent, and all of the other costs that come along with running a small business. And you would receive, I think it's about 1,300 sterling per month during a full lockdown period. I think the big challenge for small businesses isn't necessarily those periods of assistance. It's when the lockdown relaxes and the business opens, because the challenge then isn't being in hibernation. The challenge is the fact that you don't have the footfall that you had pre-lockdown, but you have all of the costs, if not more, because you're having to make the business COVID safe. So there's a need to explore other opportunities, because whether we like it or not, the chances of, just because you open your business back up, whether you own a restaurant or a gym or a retail shop, just because you open back up, it doesn't mean that the customers are going to come back in the volumes that you need or that you were operating the business under pre-lockdown. So you need to look at things
and that's you make a really good point, because one of the things that's been impacted in Australia, the UK, is restaurants. And reading your bio, you were able to help a restaurant chain in Madrid get their cash flow back on track. What were some of the things? Because I think this is really important. I think this is an incredibly important part of the interview, because as we're sitting down, I mean, the whole purpose of today's show is we're calling it a 2021 guide for small business recovery. So we've got to start making plans. What were some of the plans that you helped that particular restaurant chain put in place that actually restored their cash flow?
Yeah, so this was an interesting one, because they were actually planning expansion. Despite this was in the first sort of major lockdown, they were planning expansion despite everything that was going on, which was an interesting experience to be involved with. The challenge they had when we kind of peeled away all of the ambition and all of the kind of debate and conjecture around what it looked like, the bottom line was that they were subsidizing product lines through cash flow. So some products were kind of overperforming and other products were underperforming, and then there was a third category of products which were tying up cash but delivering such a small percentage of the revenue that they became almost unimportant. So what we did is we kind of sat down and we looked at the products that were contributing, your old 80-20 principle. What are the products that are contributing the vast majority of the revenue? Then which of those have the opportunity to grow? And the third category is which products are not important to the business enough to be able to justify a continued investment. We found a handful of categories, not specifically products, but a handful of categories that they were continuing to stock, which, one, for example, one was delivering less than 5% of their revenue. So we just said, look, that is not viable. It's not important. Let's just cut it out, take it away completely, invest the costs that you're spending on maintaining that in beginning to accelerate the products which are much more impactful for the business. And that had a real instant benefit on their cash flow. For a couple of reasons. One, the obvious one, which is that the cash was reinvested, but secondly, the products that we reinvested in could be sold during a lockdown period. Things like takeaway and click and collect and those sorts of things. So that made a real difference to their cash flow, and it's actually helped them to continue conversations with the prospective landlords of the new restaurants that they want to set up once lockdown eases.
Yeah, so 2021 is only, if you think about it, how many weeks away? I mean, we're first week of December next year. Now, a lot of companies in Australia, I don't know about the UK, but a lot of companies in Australia at this time of the year, they go into party mode. But a lot of people, like you guys, have been in lockdown for ages. What advice would you give, just in closing this interview, what advice would you, use me as an example. So I've started doing social media. I'm doing this program and reaching out to people. I'm building a membership site. I'm going to do a launch in February. If you were in my shoes, what other things would you be doing right now to get ready for 2021?
So I think there's an incredible amount that would be attached to your existing customer base. So, the reaching out to existing customers, talking to them about their needs and what it is they require. There's a lot to be said for that, because you're a known quantity to these people, and they'll happily engage in a conversation with you. Most likely, for certainly for somebody like yourself, Ken, the sales and marketing right now at the moment is going to be really, really important to people, and they're going to be, pretty hungry in a lot of instances to try and win business. So I think certainly contacting existing customers. I think the second one, which we've already touched on, is thinking about a strategy. Where are there kind of connections or synergies with other businesses in your broader network that you could get in touch with, and you could set up some kind of relationship, and it may be mutually beneficial. So you may pass them opportunity, they might pass you opportunity. How would you structure that? And then how could you expand it? So how could you kind of get one or two partners, prove the model, and then take it out from there, so that for example, with yourself, sales and marketing, you could think about people like accountants. So you might want to talk to a bunch of accountants in your local area and say, look, these are the services I offer. Do you have any clients that you could have a conversation with and introduce me to? And I can, you might get a referral fee, or you might get some kind of residual benefit from helping your clients to survive through the lockdown, or whatever. But I think partnerships is probably one of the big trends that I expect to see in small business over the coming months. And I think the third thing that I would say is play to your strengths. I think you've got, as a small business, and I actually talked, the interview that you showed earlier with Paul and I talked about this in that interview, one of the real strengths of small business is your ability to execute. You don't have the red tape and all of the bureaucracy that bigger companies have. So you need to use that to your advantage. But before you execute, just be very clear. Take some time to sit and think about the best course of action. Because you're small, because you don't have the resources, you can't do multiple things at any one time like a large business can. So large business can hedge across 2 or 3 different tactics. You can't. You've got to go after one thing, and you've got to go after it with everything you've got. So take the time to sit down, strategize, be very clear what big bet you're going to go after, line your business up after it, and give it all you've got. So I think execution is the kind of secret weapon of small businesses that big businesses just they cannot. They're not as agile. They can't operate at the pace that you can. So you've got to use that to your advantage.
It's interesting you talk about, when you were talking there, I immediately thought of social media. So my social media strategy at the moment is YouTube videos, training videos, and targeting them through people through LinkedIn. Paul Lancaster has introduced me to Twitter, which is, and you and I are now following each other. But you look at social media, there are so many platforms out there. I mean, would you be advising me to stick to one or two platforms, or to try and work through most of them?
I wouldn't class myself as any kind of social media expert. So I'm not sure how qualified I am to answer the question. What I would say is your job is to show up where your clients congregate. So my personal view would be, if you're a professional services business, your clients most likely are going to they're less likely to show up on Facebook, much more likely to show up on LinkedIn. If you're a builder or you're a florist, there's a good chance that your clients are more likely to show up on Facebook. So that might be where you'd want to focus your attention. So I think you can't be all things to all people, but there are many tools out there who will help you to produce once and publish many times. So there's an app, I think it's called something like If That Then This, and there's hundreds of different Hootsuite and all sorts of different applications that you can use to publish your content across multiple platforms. The trick here is not to get caught up in things like the number of followers you have, because it's kind of irrelevant. What matters is the engagement, and your engagement will come from creating communities in places where your customers congregate. So that's the important thing to remember. I'd much rather have 100 people that are talking constantly about my product, my offering, what I do, how I can help them, than 1,000 or 10,000 people who are kind of ghosting me on Twitter or whatever. People get obsessed with followers, and it's the wrong metric, I think.
Yeah, and that's a discussion I was having with Paul, because when I met him, and his expertise is helping startup people reach out and create networks. I mean, I've got 6 followers on Twitter. He's got 16,000. But he said the same thing. He said, Ken, it's great having the followers, but he said, I would love to have your skills of being able to get on the phone and making a cold call. And I mean, that probably comes from my age, because when I first started selling, like you, I understand you started in sales and telemarketing at Sage, and you climbed up the ranks to global vice president. I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it was anything like my experience, there was no LinkedIn. I mean, it was, get the I remember one sales job I went to, the boss said, I can give you a database. Here, I can give you 2. It's called A to K, and the other one's called L to Z. The telephone directory, and you just had to go out and make your own lists. And today in this world, we go on LinkedIn. There's so many platforms you can read about news. Like every industry has a industry magazine, which is now online. But in my day, it was a newspaper, and so you had to learn how to make a phone call. So I totally agree with you. If you'd like to find out more about Jim and his services, his website is the company's called The Bright Group. The website is, I'll just spell it out for you. It's We Are Bright, as it's spelled, wearebright.net. Jim, I'd really like to thank you for joining us today, and look forward to maintaining a network, as we're now into building networks, and I look forward to hearing of your success in 2021. Well, I'm Ken Robinson. Thank you so much for joining us today on our 2021 guide to small business recovery. But you know what? The one thing I've learned through the whole social media sphere, and I think I learned this years ago, there's a famous sales trainer called Zig Ziglar. And he used to say to people, if you help enough people get what they want, they'll help you get what you want. So if you're watching this video and you're a bit concerned about your 2021 and you're looking for a plan, I've actually got a book that I'd like to give you. It's called my Sales Booster book. It shares the story of how I earned $10,000 in my first week following a set of proven strategies. The book is yours free of charge, no strings attached. In actual fact, The only thing I would like you to do is, if you look up above you in the, I'm not sure what side of the screen it is, if you could kindly press the subscribe button. Because what I'm wanting to do with this show is I'm wanting to build networks. I'm wanting to reach out and help small businesses, not only in Australia, but all over the world, because we all need help. And I think the thing that I've learned in 2020 through my business connections and just my experience of COVID is that if we all stick together, 2021 is going to look really bright. So yes, if you could click on the subscribe button and simply subscribe to my channel. Now, why do I ask you to subscribe? Somebody asked me this the other day. Does it cost any money? No, it does not cost a cent to subscribe to this channel. But what it enables me to do is that by people subscribing, YouTube sees my videos and says, obviously people are interested, and it gets my videos out to more people. So once again, please subscribe the subscribe button. And my name's Ken Robinson. Thank you for joining me and Jim Scott. And I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you in our next program. Until then, bye for now. If you found this program helpful, I have a feeling you will love these 2 videos. To make sure you don't miss out on other programs, please click the subscribe button below. Until next time, I'm Ken Robinson. Bye for now.